The transport sat on the edge of the strip, all gray skin and silent threat. Low-profile tail, custom retrofitted wings. It didn't look like much, and that was the point. It was built to carry SEAL teams into places maps didn't show. Tonight, it was rigged for a midnight jump. The crew walked out in pairs. No noise, no chest thumping. Just calm. They passed the woman crouched near the landing strut without a second look. Same black ball cap. Same field jacket. Same clipboard always folded under one arm. Her name tag just said Morrow. No rank. No insignia. No one asked for credentials anymore. She stood slowly. Laid one palm against the inner curve of the front gear. Didn't speak. Didn't write. Just stayed there. Riker, second on the SEAL team, slowed as he stepped past her. He glanced at her hand, then at the wheel. You good? Morrow didn't look at him. Didn't nod. Didn't blink. Just pressed her fingers into the panel line like she was waiting for the aircraft to speak. Beck, the load officer, walked over from the back. Hey, he said, voice easy. All systems cleared. You're holding us up. Morrow stayed where she was. Finally she spoke. You sure the compressor seals matched retrofit numbers? Beck frowned. I checked them myself. The hydraulic dip tells me otherwise. Beck crouched, confused. I don't see it. That's because you're looking at what's there, she said. I'm looking at what's not. Her voice wasn't sharp. It was flat, like sand worn down by years of wind. 10 feet away, the SEAL team paused by the ramp. Riker leaned toward his commander. She's doing the thing again. The commander didn't smile. Then we wait. Morrow stepped back. 1 breath. 1 second. Then she turned to Beck. She's 2 hours from failing the left seal. Maybe less if you hit air current rotation on climb. Beck exhaled. I can pull her. Pull her, Morrow said. No argument. No apology. No raised voice. Just 3 words. Riker watched as the crew pulled gear from the transport and reloaded it onto the secondary aircraft. He folded his arms. That woman ever fly? The commander's jaw tightened. No. But every time she plants her hand on metal, I treat it like gospel. No medals, no backstory. Just a civilian in an old jacket, and a team that wouldn't leave without her word. By noon the next day, the second aircraft had launched clean. The SEAL crew moved quiet and fast. No stutters, no pauses. Just lift and vanish. The kind of exit only works when every bolt holds tight. Back on the tarmac, Morrow was already reviewing the next set of specs. She stood beside a third bird, smaller frame, sleeker skin. Its exterior gleamed under the sun, but she didn't look impressed. Bent low, she traced the panel line with her gloved hand, then tapped 3 times along the heat shield, pausing just long enough to feel the echo. You always do that? A voice asked. Morrow straightened. A young tech, Ryland, stood nearby, clipboard in hand and half a smirk on his face. Morrow didn't answer immediately. She looked back at the panel. I do, she said simply. Ryland tilted his head. Why? Sensors already cleared it. Morrow removed one glove and placed her bare fingers on the edge of the panel. I don't trust clearance alone, she replied. I trust friction, heat memory, torque stretch. Ryland snorted. Sounds poetic. Not practical. Morrow finally looked at him, not annoyed, not offended. Just quiet. You fly? She asked. Ryland shook his head. No. Just diagnostics and prep. Then you haven't heard what a SEAL failure sounds like at 28,000 feet, Morrow said, her voice low. It doesn't scream. It whispers. Ryland hesitated, the smile fading just a touch. From behind, Beck stepped forward, hands in his pockets. She pulled a plane yesterday, Beck said. Same call. Saved a SEAL team 5 minutes after exfil. Ryland raised an eyebrow. You serious? Beck nodded. She didn't even flinch. Morrow spoke again, not sharp, but final. You don't have to trust me, she said. She ran her hand once more down the panel, then tapped a point just beneath the frame. But I won't sign off until this line is rechecked, even if the board lights up green. Ryland shifted his stance, then gave a small nod. I'll flag the line. Morrow said nothing more. She pulled her glove back on and stepped away. Beck caught up to her near the edge of the hangar. You always that calm? He asked. Morrow looked out toward the strip. I don't have time to convince anyone, she said softly. I just make sure no one disappears because of a bolt someone forgot to tighten. Beck didn't reply. He just walked with her in silence, both of them listening to the hum of a bird preparing for a mission only half the base knew about. And this time, no one second-guessed the way her hand paused on the skin of the wing. Lieutenant Danner spotted her near the service rail, still noting pressure lines on the new bird. He didn't slow down. "Morrow," Danner called, waving his tablet. "Inspection log looks clear. Why is this unit still flagged?" Elena Morrow didn't turn. She ran one gloved hand along the edge of the vent cover. "Rear hydraulic doesn't settle after flex," she said. Danner stepped closer. "I'm not seeing any alerts." Morrow tapped the frame twice with her knuckles. "That's because the alert won't hit until it's too late." Danner's voice tightened. "You're not qualified to ground flight assets. You're contracted." She looked at him calmly. "I'm qualified to notice when something's about to give." Danner took another step. "You're holding up a SEAL flight that's already behind schedule." Before Morrow could reply, a new voice cut in. "She's not holding us up," Riker said, stepping in from behind the wing. Danner turned, startled. "You're cleared for this op?" Riker nodded once. "We don't move until she clears it." Danner narrowed his eyes. "Why?" Riker's tone didn't change. "Because the last time someone overruled her, 3 men walked back with equipment failure and a 1-minute blackout gap." He looked at Morrow. "You still see it?" Morrow nodded once. "Line's soft. Needs a retorque. Won't take long." Riker turned back to Danner. "You heard her." Danner hesitated, then stepped back. "I'll log the delay." He didn't look happy, but he didn't argue again. Morrow didn't thank Riker. She just looked at the vent cover once more, then reached for her tools. Riker leaned in slightly. "Most people would raise their voice." Elena didn't smile. "I'm not here to win," she said quietly. "I'm here to get them home." Riker leaned on the intake ramp after sundown, arms crossed, watching the deck go quiet. Elena Morrow had disappeared again behind the hangar. Same walk, same clipboard. Always moving before the questions caught up. Riker turned slightly toward Beck, who stood by the tie-down logs. "She ever serve?" Riker asked. Beck shook his head slowly. "No record. Nothing under DoD, Navy, or Air Force." Riker narrowed his eyes. "No school? No overseas contractor file?" Beck flipped open a weathered notebook from his jacket pocket. "Not officially. But look at this." He tapped a page marked by a red tab. "There's a repair note logged in Djibouti. 8 years ago. SEAL airframe. Stall on descent." Riker leaned closer. "That op was never filed publicly." Beck nodded once. "Override was handwritten. No signature. Just 2 letters at the bottom. M. Morrow." An hour later, Riker found her beside the tool crates, checking a parts tray. "You've worked a lot of strips," Riker said. Morrow didn't look up. "Some," she replied. "You ever run a line in red sand?" he asked. She paused, then nodded. "Once. There was a stall," Riker said. "SEAL bird came in heavy and off balance. They used the wrong tie seals," Morrow said softly. "I told them to ground it." "You wrote the override?" Morrow set the tray down, glancing over. "I did." Riker stepped closer. "Why didn't you sign it?" "They don't always listen when you sign," she said quietly. He didn't respond, just watched her pick up the tray and walk toward the shadow of the next airframe. Riker stood still. Now he wasn't wondering who she was. He was starting to realize how long she'd been the quiet voice between risk and return, and how many never heard her until it was too late. The alert came at 0142 hours. A transport bird mid-flight had dropped off the map. No telemetry, no signal return, no engine tone on the radar scrub. Riker stood over the ops table, jaw tight. "Comms went lost 2 minutes after ascent," he said. Beck leaned in. "No response on the fallback channel." Someone from the tower called out. "Primary routing systems cycling. They may be lost onboard nav." Across the hangar, Elena Morrow stepped through the side door. No one spoke to her. She walked straight to the manual flight chart mounted to the wall, the one no one had used in years. Her eyes scanned the curvature, slow, precise. Then she spoke. "They're in grid 14 Bravo," Morrow said calmly. Beck turned. "How do you know?" "They were rerouted earlier to avoid a wind tunnel," she replied. "But that moved their arc 2 degrees off standard. If they stayed low for signal compression, they drifted west." Riker stepped beside her. "That grid's not in the NAV cycle." Morrow pointed to a faded line on the wall chart. "It was. In 2009. Before they updated the silent climb pattern." Beck looked at her. "You still remember the old grid?" Morrow gave a small nod. "Because the airframe hasn't changed." Just the way they look at it. Riker took a breath. Could they still be gliding? If they're smart, she said. They'll dip under the thermals. The route's still sound, if you don't panic. The room went quiet. Then Riker turned to command. Ping grid 14 Bravo. All bands. One of the techs looked up. That's a blind zone. They won't. They'll hear it, Morrow said, her voice even. They've been listening the whole time. 17 seconds later, the radio hissed once, and came alive. Team returning. Shadow NAV confirmed. Coming in low. No one said anything. Riker looked at her. You kept that whole route in your head? He asked. I walked it in my sleep for 3 years, Morrow replied softly, and then she stepped back into the shadow of the airframe, already preparing for the next bird. The bird touched down just after 0300. Gear barely held, left strut dragging, paint scorched from wind shear. But it landed, clean enough to count. No rescue scramble. No medical team. Just 5 SEALs stepping off under their own strength, quiet, heads level. At the edge of the tarmac, Morrow stood with her hands in her jacket pockets. She didn't wave, didn't move. Riker walked past her without speaking, eyes on the bird's trailing edge. Beck came up behind him. They flew the grid she gave, Beck said. Riker gave a small nod. She mapped it with no satellite support, he said quietly. No hesitation. Across the way, Commander Ellison approached. Square jaw. Weathered boots. He didn't ask questions. He just looked at Morrow. You routed them home, Ellison said. Elena Morrow nodded once. I did. Ellison's gaze held steady. No protocol covers what you just pulled off. I wasn't following protocol, she replied. There was a pause. Then Ellison stepped back, just half a pace, and gave her the smallest nod of respect. Not ceremony. Not show. Just recognition. Later that morning, someone found the flight chart she'd used. The faded grid line, 14 Bravo, was circled in pencil. No name. No timestamp. Just a line drawn like she'd known it all along. The new shift commander asked Beck, "Why didn't she write her name on the form?" Beck replied without looking up. "She doesn't write it unless something's broken." By afternoon, the maintenance crew started taping route diagrams to the briefing wall. Old pads, hand-drawn, some nearly forgotten. Every one of them marked with her initials now. Not because she asked, but because the teams did. And nobody launched again without asking if Elena Morrow had checked the skin. By the end of the week, her chair was empty. The clipboard stayed on the rack. Her gloves were gone. No note, no send-off. Just a shift rotation filled by someone else. Younger, louder, clipboard filled with digital printouts instead of pencil marks. Beck stood at the far end of the hangar, arms folded. She didn't say goodbye, he said. Riker stepped beside him, watching the new tech struggle to read a pressure gauge by feel. She never said hello either, Riker replied. Beck exhaled. She just knew. That morning, the prep checklist for pre-flight had changed. At the bottom, past gear clearance and hydraulic response, someone had added a handwritten question. Did Morrow walk it? The box stayed empty, but no one checked it lightly. At the loadout bench, Ryland stood over a pressure reading. He tapped it twice, unsure. Something's off, Ryland said. The shift lead glanced over. Still within range. Ryland frowned. Yeah, but it doesn't sound right. The lead shrugged. Then don't sign it. Ryland paused, then reached for a wrench. She wouldn't have. On the second night without her, a small square of paper appeared beside the crew binder. No words. Just a single line drawn across the page. A flight path, ending with a curve tucked just inside the landing bracket. Someone had sketched it in pencil. No name. Riker picked it up and stared at it for a long time, then slid it into the back cover of his manual. She left? Beck asked from behind. No, Riker said softly. She just stepped back. That evening, a team prepped for silent lift. No one spoke as they moved across the deck. At the end of the ramp, they paused, not by habit, but by instinct, as if waiting for someone to place their hand on the airframe and say nothing, but mean everything. She wasn't there, but her silence still was. The mission board changed. Not the screens, not the system, just the rhythm. Now, before every lift, one extra moment passed, short, quiet, intentional. It wasn't on the checklist. No one called it out. But they did it anyway. A pause, right at the ramp, where she used to stand. Ryland caught himself doing it, hand on the fuselage, fingers pressing along the panel seam, just like she used to. He didn't hear anything, But somehow, he still listened. In the command shed, Beck opened the drawer she'd used for field notes. Most of the pages were gone. But one was left. Folded small, tucked beneath a wrench she'd once refused to replace because it still carried the feel. He unfolded it. It wasn't instructions, not exactly. Just a note, written in clean block letters. If it feels wrong, don't wait for permission. Beck read it twice, then placed it face down on the desk. Didn't file it. Didn't log it. But he never closed the drawer again. The new shift lead tried to replicate her logs. He even brought a tablet with real-time diagnostics, stood by the wing like she used to. But the crew didn't look at him. They looked past him, toward the shadow line where Morrow used to stand, where the pencil marks still faded under the heat. Riker walked the edge of the strip one evening, watching the flight prep from a distance. Next to the bird, Ryland stood still, glove off, palm pressed against the intake curve. Riker approached slowly. You checking for memory? Ryland didn't move. Feels warm, he said quietly. But it's been off for 20 minutes. Riker glanced toward the wind. She would have noticed that. Ryland nodded. I know. Later that night, someone mounted a small plate beside the hangar door. No ribbon. No speech. Just a strip of matte steel, hand-etched with 6 words. She never spoke loud. She knew. No rank. No emblem. Just the weight of a truth that didn't need ceremony. Morrow never returned. Not because she quit. Because her job had never been about being seen. She wasn't there to lead from the front. Or to teach by lecture. Or to remind them who she was. She was there to listen to machines, trust her instincts, and send good people home. And now, even without her voice, every silence felt like hers.